What's your carnal theory?
Hey there, you're listening to Carnal Theory, where we talk with experts from around the world to learn how taking command of our sexual story affects our personal wellness, sexual experiences, and relationships with ourselves and others. Hi everyone, I'm Abba.
And I'm Amanda. And today we're talking with Citra Benazir, author of Pleasure Girls and the founder of 'Tis the Life. Not only is she an active volunteer with some of the biggest feminist movements and organizations in Indonesia, she also uses her platform to support women and girls to speak out on topics such as sexual assault and harassment, as well as the importance of education and women's rights around the world. Citra, thank you and welcome to Carnal Theory.
Thank you for having me.
Really, really our pleasure. We've been chatting for a while, and I have wanted to get to talk with you deeper on your work because when I stumbled across Pleasure Girls, I don't know, at least getting closer and closer to a year ago, probably, maybe not quite a year, I was so impressed, and I remember sending it to Amanda and being like, whoever this is, like, we need to get in touch with them. Like, they're doing really cool stuff. This is like, take note. We need to talk. So really, thank you for coming on with us. And to start us off, we like to start each show with a carnal theory for us all to consider. This theory, as a reminder to our guest, this theory is meant to challenge a presumption or perception that we might have in regards to our monthly theme, which this month is masculine and feminine energies. So we'll also end our episode by revisiting this theory that Citra gives to us, just to see if any of our perceptions might have changed over the course of our conversation, and giving you an invitation to consider it for further reflection. So, Citra, could you tell us what the theory is that you have brought for us today?
The polarities of masculine and feminine energies are completely separate from our construct of gender.
I love it.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think many people hear masculine and feminine, and they just automatically assign gender to it, which means gender roles, all the constructs that come with it. Here's what it means to be masculine. Here's what it means to be feminine. And don't you dare move outside of those boxes or it'll be confusing. And we're getting into times where that's a lot more fluid. So in terms of what you feel like those mean to our personal energies, how does that relate and resonate with you? Why was this something that you wanted to bring to the table?
Well, because even though in like one hand it is becoming more fluid, but in another hand, in places like Indonesia, where our everything is constructed and everything is limited by religion and the government and culture itself, I think it's actually becoming more stated where women should be and what men should do, and even in roles in like modern relationships, in what I see in just relationships that are close to me, with my friends who are expecting so much out of their boyfriends, expecting so much out of their girlfriends, and it's amazing for me to see, because growing up I wasn't really raised with such notion in mind. I guess because I'm an only child, and in addition to that, I'm an only grandchild and niece in my whole entire family. So I guess my family just wanted me to be, as tough as possible, as independent as possible, and they didn't actually say that those points were masculine in any way. So
and when you say some of the expectations that you see in these other relationships around you and some of your friends? What are some of these expectations that you see?
Just socially, the girls are supposed to ask their boyfriends permission to go out when hanging out with friends, especially if there are male friends in their friendship circles. And also just the differences I see within my relationship with them is, in my relationship with my partner, we don't really have financial burdens for each other, like paying bills in restaurants and stuff. So when I go out with my partner and I pay the bills, it's such a shock for them. Like, how could you as a guy not treat your girlfriend? Just stuff like that. And then on top of that, sexually, of course, not pleasuring the guys, and without any regard for the woman's pleasure.
How do you think that relates in relationship to our personal energies? These terms, masculine and feminine. Do you feel like those terms end up influencing the energy that we put out?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I'm 24. Maybe it's still young, but I've had a few relationships where it wasn't this way. This is my first relationship that has been such empowering and open. But before this, all of those expectation and biases and stereotypes in being a woman in a relationship with a man, it's like all of those expectation and roles are just such a burden to us, and it influences our self-worth and how we look at ourselves. And it was just so like every day was like putting on a show, or going on a date would be like going to work. So there was no room to be free or explore ourselves as we grow older with each other.
And how do so we're talking a lot right now in terms of relationships, but how, for someone who isn't in a relationship, how do you see those expectations coming to fruition as well? Like, what kind of expectations are they put under?
Well, in Indonesia, it's more like, I think there are some who just actually avoid any relationships or any contact with the opposite gender, because they feel like it's such a tremendous pressure for them to act a certain way or behave a certain way, where they just suppress it all and repress their since every individual has their own masculine and feminine energies in their own way, and I think it's our own journey to explore them both. And when we are so pressured to not explore each energy in our own terms, and that just makes such a repressed and not being able to be our own self and not knowing who that is. And I think for those who are not in a relationship, just avoid being in contact with with the opposite gender, because they don't want to find out, or they don't want to behave a certain way, or being told to be a certain way.
Yeah.
Do you see people trying to break out of these stereotypes?
Yeah, I can talk all day about how I used to be bullied in middle school and high school for being different, for being more of the soccer player. I wasn't the cheerleader, and wearing like sneakers and not flats, because in my generation, at least in high school and middle school, the girls were dressed the same way, even though we were in uniforms, but they were all behaving the same way, with their long hair, and their skirts were shorter and everything like that. And I wasn't built for that. I couldn't fit in with that. And being that different just exploded a whole new, world of gossip and backstabbing. What's funny is actually, I think since we are so influenced by like American movies and we tend to be a lot more mean girlish in our school with like seniority and stuff. So it was tough being different, and rumors like she's a lesbian probably, or she's like she doesn't, even though I was dating guys that they knew, there were guys in my class, but I had such short hair and I was the captain of the soccer team. I ran sprints with like the boys, and in PE the girls weren't expected to do anything. That was my biggest concern. The girls only played with the girls, and when a girl is hanging out with the guys, they're always called like a slut, or she's doing every guy they see. And in class, I thought that wasn't gonna happen, but in PE, especially when our coach is a guy, a man, the girls just sat back and but still getting grades for that, and while the guys can play any sport they want, explore anything they like, hobbies, the girls were just sitting back, and they thought that was a compliment. I mean, wow, we don't have to do anything, we get good grades, and I was like, I want to play too. So in just in that system of education, it highly impacted ourselves outside of school.
I am it sucks to say this, but that's definitely not an Indonesia thing.
Yeah. As you were speaking, I was like, can identify. I wonder how these different, or not different, they feel very similar to what I and Abba have experienced in the US. I wonder why they're so similar, and they're so far, like these communities are so far away from each other physically, but what do you think is creating these pressures and these experiences it's happening everywhere? You mentioned like Mean Girls and how your culture is influenced a lot by films and such in the United States. I wonder if that's like a big part of it, or if there's so much more at play. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think films have certainly impacted, but for the generation of like my parents and the teachers that I had, for certain, I don't think it's the films, but it's just it may sound the same, but they probably got it from a different standpoint, from just historical and cultural history of Indonesia and being Muslim and all of that. They're interpreting as women should beware, and all of this interpretation were spoken by men. So that's why nowadays me and my fellow activists are really pushing that, finding women who are leaders in the Muslim community who can speak out on a different interpretation and iteration of the on everything it defines how a woman should be. So I think it's for us, for our generation, the bullies, of course, comes, I think a majority comes from movies. But it's funny that whenever I went to college in the States, but whenever I'm abroad, I never not that I never experienced any bullying, but I was always it was always possible for me to explore anything I wanted. There was a girls' soccer team. I didn't have to write a petition to the headmaster to create a girls' soccer team where I didn't actually experience it myself. And the girls under me, my juniors, were plowing through that. But it's, I don't know. I mean, I've always felt that I could whenever I'm abroad. So I think that's why my vision changed also, and my self identity is so different when I came back here.
Wow. You mentioned your activism, and I really want to talk about that. You've started a few things now. Can you talk about when you started your first activism measures and what made you start?
Okay. Well, for volunteering, I've always thought that I've always wanted to help in from elementary school. When I was in Ukraine, there was a community service points that we had to do. So I think it all started from there, where I could see that even a little kid, can make a difference. And it started by like helping out in garage sales and bake sales and stuff, and up to like helping out in animal shelters. And also for in Ukraine, when I was there, we had a big anniversary for the Chernobyl incident, so we raised money for that. But I brought that back home when Women's March Jakarta started. I remember that clearly because
and when was that?
The first one happened in 2017. Yeah, 2017. And it wasn't that long after the Women's March in the States.
Yeah.
After he got elected. Yeah. So I think that just, was the catalyst for me. And I've always wanted to help out home. And I found this, amazing women who now become my, colleagues and friends. And we were all fighting for the same thing. And we were all different generations, intersectional, my queer friends, even my male survivors, and anything. We were fighting for the same thing because, even though the Women's March happened in the States because of one particular person, but here it turns out that there was so many things wrong in our constitution and in our rights that women and minorities were not given. So that's when I started helping out even more in like the sexual assault community, harassment community. And I'm the co-director for Hollaback Jakarta, which is a branch from the States as well, where we've been focusing on public harassment.
Which is a branch from the what?
From the States. From the States as well. There is a Hollaback in the States. I forgot which city it started on. But, public harassment in public transportations, we've had researches about that where, girls ranging from wearing all niqab and hijab are still getting catcalled with the girls who are wearing short skirts and mini skirts and, tank tops. So there's no, just putting that research out there. And also we have rules where women are not allowed to walk home alone after a certain time at night. Also, we're fighting for that, like for workers who are, female workers who gets night shifts and stuff. If they walk home just to go home, then she shouldn't get fined for that, right? So, stuff like that. We've been really dealing with that on top of injustice for like our queer friends, especially our trans peers.
Do you know if there's any movements or efforts to be made to educate the people who need to be educated to get these changes? So, we know it's not about what you're wearing. It's about the education and intention of the person who is willing to assault or catcall or whatever the instance is. Do you know if there's efforts being made to address that in school, to say that is not allowed, that is not permissible, that should not even be a notion in your mind?
Yeah. Well, there's no official movement that are doing that yet. Mainly because every time a movement gets big and wants to push into like government and schools and the national system, they get stomped back. So it's not like the activists are not doing anything, but we're constantly being shut down. But that's been on my mind so much lately, because as an activist, you don't want to be an activist for like 24/7. You get burnt out, and you get tired of saying the same things. It's not the victim's fault. They're still doing that. But I think I'm so afraid that these movements are creating a circle more like a clique, where we keep talking to the same people. Our audience are already woke. The ones that are catcalling me at night are these older men who don't have internet probably, or just watch television. So that's what I want to push forwards to a mainstream view. In televisions, there's still sexist jokes, fat phobia. The women are supposed to be, there are only two types of women when you see Indonesian television, like ones that are funny and ones that are so pretty that she can only be seen as pretty. So it's horrible, but the majority of people that are doing that don't get the same access and resources that we do. That's why I keep, it's worrying that these me and my friends are only talking to the same people. I think that's why we need to probably brainstorm with other activists all over the world how they are doing that, managing that.
Yeah.
It's a really important part of changing perspectives is like you can't just stick to your bubble. And in the US we saw like we were aggressively reminded of how intense our bubbles are during the 2016 election, when neither side, like both sides were like, we know exactly what's going to happen. We don't need to worry. Like everyone is thinking the same thing as us. And then that was absolutely not true, because we just weren't listening to anything outside of our bubble. And we didn't even have a thought in our mind that was like, people don't think this, like everyone thinks this. So I think that's a really, really important point. And it's really difficult, especially when like entire like vocabularies and discourses are created within that bubble. And then you try and talk to someone outside of that bubble, and they're going to be like, whoa, I heard you say this word that in my head, I'm triggered to know that you are not in the same line of thinking or experience that I am. So I'm just going to shut down because I'm not going to agree with you. So it's really hard to cross those boundaries, and it is hard work and it is grueling, and I commend you. So everyone that is trying to do that is very much like should be worshipped, because it is very, very draining and very much something that can burn you out easily.
Yeah, because what I'm also scared of is that these old men are passing that down to their children, to their sons, to their daughters, and where when we can talk to these younger generation as much as we can, but if they're forced upon that notion or that thinking at home, so much drilled in so much in their family, then what are they supposed to do? I mean, their child marriages rates are up. I've had friends in my schools, middle school, which became pregnant, but only the girls were dropped out. The guys were still in school and still get to pursue, get a certificate and get a degree. But the girls are just, and then all these rumors start, oh, she got pregnant, she's this, it was just unfair to see all of that. So, I mean, it's a harsh reality.
Fortunately, we can see that, like, even if you are raised in a certain way, we as hard as it is, we can see examples of just because you're raised a certain way doesn't mean you can't change your mind. I can speak to my grandmother. My grandmother raised in a time where racism was what you did, you know, and to break against that was breaking against everything that was ingrained in her. And throughout her life, she did. Kind of my parents, even their generation, similarly, they were brought up where segregation was still very prevalent. And, you know, the terms that they had to deal with and come to throughout their lives are things that, you know, that they worked on. And, you know, they are not racist, you know, like just because they were raised that way doesn't mean they are. And I think that applies to so many other fields. And a lot of that has to do with the education and exposure that you're given, which is a huge part of what we're about, which is like, okay, if you're taught sex education, if you're taught empowerment at whatever age, you know, we would advocate for as early as possible. But even if you're in your 20s or 30s where it's pretty established already, 40s, 50s, whatever, it doesn't mean that you cannot shift your mindset and expectation and therefore work through whatever you might be repressed, depressed, suppressing, and then change both your mindset and therefore your actions about things. And so I'm curious what sex education looks like, what that was for you. Maybe it might have been different for you. Maybe it wasn't, versus what the average person gets.
There are no sex education in schools. You know, sex education for us was porn or boys talking about their experiences out loud to each other, or, you know, catcalls. But even when I was in Ukraine, I had sex education for a bit, but that was never properly spoken at home. Where at home it was just like, okay, you got the knowledge, you got everything. Now you're expected to behave or act upon that knowledge. You know, my parents were extremely trustful with me, with you know, boyfriends and everything, even though I was going through it myself. You know, me watching porn at such a young age, worrying through pregnancy scares from sexual acts that cannot end in pregnancy, actually, you know. But it was such fear-based for me, and I couldn't just talk about it with my parents, especially with my dad. You know, period-wise, body-wise, my mom was still on top of that, and, you know, my parents were just interested in the boys that I liked, or, you know, all that, the gossip stuff, but not the actual what's in my mind, what the questions that I still had, you know. And internet was such a big help, but it's not as wide and array like we had now. So the basic sex education in Indonesian schools are not comprehensive at all. They're not taught in schools as much as we want to.
Yeah. I do want to make sure that we talk about Pleasure Girls some more, because that's the account that I connected with you on originally. Well, first off, I want to share some of the pieces that you have in Pleasure Girls, but can you talk about what Pleasure Girls is and why you started it?
Yeah. It's funny how you said that you found that. It's such, you know, it's amazing for me that this little book from an indie publisher has gotten so many great feedback, because there was this publisher that I volunteered at a literary festival, and a few months after that, I became friends with these 3 women who started this publishing company, and they offered me to write something. So I didn't have anything in mind, and what motivated me was my previous relationships, where I couldn't explore myself. I couldn't explore my sexuality within that relationships. So that motivated me, and at first it was just a journal of the years that I think is still the hardest that I've been through. But it starts from senior year in high school, where I recount every bullyings and every shame.
Can you back
Stereotypes
up?
as well.
Can you back up when you recount every?
When I recount every bullying and shame that I had in school, in high school, that connected with like the biases and the stereotypes as well. And that, from that point on, it just started to tell a story of my journey of womanhood, me finding my own self after all of that happened. You know, I had my first traumatic sexual harassment and assault in middle school. So I still, you know, the trauma was still there. So I had to process that. And this is kind of the journey that leads to that. And of course, the things that I say and the things that happen weren't so much accepted from the mainstream publisher. Because again, after publishing Pleasure Girls, actually a mainstream publisher approached me to write a similar book. And, you know, they said it was okay to write in English. But when I said that I'm gonna write a few things about, you know, the realities of being a woman, the journey, the everyday life of being a woman, they were so hard on censoring. Like, don't use like religious stuff, don't say about like LGBT stuff, don't use these kinds of words, don't use profanity. And I'm like, then that's not my story. So, you know, I kind of back away from that. And if you ever come to Indonesia and see go to these large bookstores, the first thing you would see are these propagandas of, you know, child marriages and how a wife should be, and it's all based on this theoretical of like religious notions and thinkings. So that's what I don't want to write about. You know, I'm writing a second book of Pleasure Girls, and in which this would be a full sexual journey of my relationships and what had happened and what I've learned from that, and how this relationship is different from that, where, you know, we've me and my partner now are considering, like, not considering, but exploring that monogamy is not the only way, and there are no, you know, jealousy and stuff like that. And Pleasure Girls is basically that, me processing everything, like addiction, you know, because I was so depressed, anxiety, that all led to, you know, I had a great time when I went to college in the States, but that was also the first time I was myself. You know, I was exploring everything. Everything was such an adventure, but, you know, always on a high, you get low again, you know. So family issues, family problems are all written in that, the first Pleasure Girls.
Beautiful. And there's, you spoke of journey, and one of the pieces that I wanted to highlight, 2016, parentheses number 5, my only goal in life is to be free. You can iterate that any way you wish, but for me, to be free, ultimately free, infinitely free, is the journey's end. What's yours?
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I love so many of the pieces that you've written, but that's one of them that I love. And then you just mentioned Journey's End, or your journey, and how, you know, that the book is a story of that, and that it's important. So it resonated to mention.
Yeah, after that, a whole lot of young girls messaged me about the stories in Pleasure Girls, where they're like, first they wanted to thank me for writing it as such, you know, loud pieces with no censorship and no shame in the stories, where some of us, especially in our culture, hide those stories. But also, I'm learning so much that these girls are, you know, they're experiencing the same things, but they're so trained to be silent, you know, to be small. So I think this is just my story. I don't think my story is different from the rest, but I think it is different in a way where I tell it becomes freeing. and I released all the burdens of being a daughter, of being a girlfriend, of being a woman, and just live my life.
Encompass whatever energies, be they feminine, be they masculine, and the balance of both of those, like we were talking about. Do you have male identifying people who contact you and talk about the stories, and if things resonated?
Well, the first was the guys who were mentioned in the book. I mean, I didn't use their names, but I think they get the shade, so they're like, is this me? Is this me? Did I really do this to you? So that was a whole conversation as well, as I was still at that point, still avoiding this one perpetrator that that made me be this traumatic. But in addition to that, their friends, my friends in middle school who didn't see that was happening, so they were like, why didn't you call us? We're you can call us brothers. We got your back, but why didn't you say anything? So they got a realization as well that this was happening, and they didn't see that. So conversations with my male friends, and with this upcoming book, of course, I'll be writing about more of my male figures in my life, and I've spoken to them so much before writing, because of course I'm not gonna mention their names, but it's a learning process for all of us.
Before we have to wrap up, I want to bring it back to the theory that you had proposed at the beginning, which relates to our masculine and feminine energies. And I believe that we all contain these energies inside us. They're not necessarily associated with the gender we identify with, the energies within us. They don't have to be. But how do you feel these energies? How do you identify with those different energies within you personally?
Well, when we started talking about this episode, I started researching about like masculine and feminine, like the definition of their energies, and the definition was really mind-blowing, where masculine were like independent and dominant and assertive, creative. That was all masculine, and practical, visionary, where feminine is more like caring, intuitive, compassion, emotion, which I think is great, for feminine energies to have all that. But I think it's also when you see it written down, and I've spoken to this about with my partner, it's like for males to see this, they're like, I'm caring too, I'm empathic too, so I think we should just leave all of these labels behind, and have these positive values in ourselves, and it's our own journey and our own process to figure this all out. But don't limit them before you start exploring.
Can you back up? Don't limit them.
Don't limit them to before you start exploring. Don't limit them to a gender, to a label that this value is feminine, this value is masculine. So as a woman, we're more using our right brain, and the masculine aspect of it was they were using a majority of their left brain. So I think it's just when you see it this written down, it's so I mean demeaning maybe to see it that one group of humanity has this aspect and you're limiting yourself to that. So I think just let it go and explore yourself. Don't limit yourself before you start.
Thank you for that. That's powerful.
Yeah.
So as we close out, we mentioned at the top, we want to loop back on what the carnal theory was that Citra brought. And she said that the polarities of masculine and feminine energies, that they are completely separate. from our construct of what gender is. And I hope that you, the audience, you take that away with you and you can meditate and think on that for a while. Citra, thank you so much. We want to help push out your new book, and we'll be in touch when that comes out. Congratulations. And thank you for talking with us. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for always, talking to me and supporting me. And you have an amazing platform, and I'm so lucky to have found you.
Thank you. And if anyone wants to reach out to us with questions or insights, you can do so by reaching out to us through our Instagram page at Carnal Theory or at MySexBio. And definitely go check out and follow Citra's work on her Instagram pages at the Arctic Benazir or at pleasuregirls_, also at tis.thelife, life with a Y. Those are her 3 platforms. So definitely go check her out and follow her there. Thank you all so much.
Carnal Theory is produced by MySexBio. Our sound design is by Audrey Cohane, and our theme music by Men the Universe. MySexBio is an educational platform built to empower people like you to take command of your sexual biography. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, and Spotify at MySexBio. Visit our website and join our e-letter at mysexbio.org and support our work by joining our Patreon. Thank you.